Hi there, this is just a quick demonstration of a new piece of functionality that's been added to DataOrigins and therefore EMax. The grids, as in these, are now editable. They have two modes. You can see down here there's a read-only box, so it's either read-only, which would be that ticked, or it's editable, which is unticked. That's also available on right-click, switch to read-only, and right-click, switch to editable. The reason it's there is because you may not have this filter bar on your grid. There are implications with regards to having the grids editable. When they are read-only, the system, to get this data, is sending one SQL command to the server and receiving back only the data that you see on the screen there. And the columns that you choose, so it's extremely efficient, extremely quick. If I go to something like this one here, just time and attendance transactions, that there, which is not read-only, when it's read-only like that, like I say, it's coming across as one set of data, and it's only the data that you see on the screen. So this employee is just that there. All it comes across is that string, Mr. Charles with the S missing, care, not the employee object. So it doesn't bring across anything else to do with me as the employee record at all. It's just that string. So it's very efficient and fast. When we go into edit mode, it gets a lot more complicated. In order to make sure that we do not change data without the business logic being applied, in other words, all the rules of your system being applied, we cannot just edit data. So you can't be allowed to, for example, in a sales order, just change the tax completely manually on a grid without actually updating the total, and so on and so on. So like I say, all the rules of the system have to be applied. You can't just edit the data. In order for that to happen, what you're seeing on the screen in an editable grid is the objects. So it doesn't just bring across what you've got in these columns. It brings across the entire data for the records that you have got selected. So if you're filtering it, it only brings back the ones that you filter down to, but it does bring back every single field for that object, in order to display it on the screen in edit mode. So there's quite a significant amount of data there. The other big difference is that as soon as you add a foreign key as a column in an editable grid, it has to load each one of those objects as a foreign key individually for each row. So this employee record, if I go to column chooser, you'll see in edit mode, because this grid's in edit mode, the foreign keys have now got a checkbox beside them. You can drill down and also edit foreign key fields, such as this one here, which is the employee.fullname, and you'll see that it's ticked. Should be ticked, and it's not. Check that out. So it should be ticked. That's a slight bug there, I've just realised. But adding these, you can actually edit foreign object fields on the grid as well. Now that is an implication that we will have to educate users about, because, for example, on a purchase order line, a grid that's showing purchase order or item lines, somebody might go into Field Chooser and go into the item drill down and see a description and click on it and bring it into the grid, and then somebody else comes along and sees it there, description, excellent, I'll change that because I can't be bothered creating a new item, so I'm going to create a sundry item and just type whatever I want in there, not realizing that what they're actually doing is updating the description on the item, not, in other words, the part, not the purchase order itself. So like I say, you can drill down in edit mode to display all the information you want on the grids. It will allow you to edit that information, but we're going to have to educate users to the fact that what you're actually editing is the foreign objects and not data on the top object, if that's what you're displaying. The reason that we have the tick box on here is because this actually allows you, if you tick that one, for example, yeah, which is a foreign object on the main TA transactions, that gives you a drop down effectively. So that's you selecting which employee belongs to this TA transaction. Okay, and I'll show you how that works. So this row at the bottom here, which always appears, is your add new, and you'll see that you're getting the same controls that you would get on the form. So it's actually one of our drop downs, and it works exactly the same way as it would in a form. So there we go. And I could also start typing the same way as you would normally. So you get the same editing facilities that you have on a form. That's all been done to make sure that the system works exactly the same way on the grids as it does on the forms. So this is fairly functional. It's a good function, but like I say, we are going to have to educate users that there are implications on it. For example, rather than bringing across, when it's read-only, one SQL statement with just that data, this grid here is actually going to bring across, I've got 14 records, so I've got one SQL statement brings across the 14 TA transactions, and then it has to issue an SQL command for each employee to bring back the employee records, so there'd be another 14, and then we've also got another foreign key there which is overridden by, and so that would be another 14, so you could potentially have 29 SQL commands running just to display that one grid. Okay, so that's quite a big difference, one command to 29 commands. Okay, and those 29 commands are not just all equal, because the employee record is actually quite massive. If you go to employees and go to column chooser, and have a look at all the columns that are available in there, yeah, it's going to have to bring across all those columns 28 times. Okay, just to display this row, just to display that employee in there. Okay, because it has to load the entire objects in. Robert, you understand that about how it's all object orientated and how it's having to bring the objects in order to apply the business logic. So you may be the best person to start explaining that to people in the office. But like I say, it is going to require training. But it works, and it works well. This row down the bottom here, when you're in editable mode, is your add new row. And the way they work, all the rows work, as soon as you start typing on a cell, it overrides what's there. So it works fairly well. Return moves you to the next row, tab moves you on to the next column, enter commits the row and saves it. Moving on a row, by the way, also commits it and saves it. The rows get saved at that point in time. I'll show you where it's quite nice. There are some places where having editable rows work well. Okay, so here's a sales order. I've got this in edit mode. As you can see, I've enabled that filter bar so that you can see that it's in edit mode. I'm sure you probably know that you can format grid and take away the filter bar, which makes it look like that. Okay, so this is a brand new sales order. And I can actually just go ahead and start adding in my sales order like this, and you'll see it picked up the VAT and the UOM from the item there, and it's picked up that, and you'll see when I hit enter there to commit that row, all the calculations on the sales order went ahead, and then if I was to do control enter, it would have saved that sales order, and that's it. Now that, to some people, is what they really want when they're entering in sales orders. Okay, we've had that comment lots of times from people, and I've had it recently from a few people saying that it's quite cumbersome having to do it the way that we've always done it, which is if I put this into read-only mode. Our normal way for entering a sales order would have been this: add new, bring up that grid, bring up that screen, select the same thing, put the 6 in, put the price in. Much better way of doing it, much more information on there, to be honest. But some people just don't like it this way, and it's exactly the same, yeah. But there's an extra screen pops up and so on and so on. So so like I say, we do have it now. There are implications. It does cause data issues, like I say, but for those who have fairly fast networks and don't mind the implications, you know, then you have the ability, like I say, to do this, and you know, you can enter these in quite quickly. You know, for companies who have got people in sales who are constantly entering in sales orders, and they know the codes for the sales for all the products that they sell, and they just basically want to go down and punch them all in, and then, you know, change the quantities for each part, and there's a price list behind it, probably picking up the prices, which I could have set up. That's all working, and that would have so those prices would have been pulled in automatically because the business logic is running in the background. They could just have put the product codes in of who's on the phone ordering it, put the quantities in they want, hit Control Enter, it would save it, Control Enter saves, and that would be the sales order process. So it's quick, it's slick, it works, all the business logic is being applied, so, you know, it works, and it works well. It's a pain in the butt to implement, but it's done, and it's like I say, it should keep a number of our customers happy. I guess it's a benefit of going to the new system, which will suit anybody who's got a high turnover of sales orders. It's also going to suit, I know there's a request in at the moment for putting a tab on the item screen for the bill of materials. You can imagine just going down in the bill of materials exactly the same way as I just did there with a sales order, putting in the item codes for the bill of material, putting in the quantity for that bill of materials. Same with routing. We've had requests over and over again from companies for doing routing. They just want to put in the op number, type in the machine, put in the hours, move on to the next one. You know, this having to open and close screens all the time just seems to annoy people. So there we go. Now there was something else that I was going to say. Yes, sales orders. This quantity, there's an implication. You cannot edit child collections. Okay, so you can't go to a sales order. I'll show you what I mean here. When you're in read-only mode, okay, you have access to the child collections, so you can go into the sales order items, and you can bring in you know, the item number, and then you can drill down on that one and bring in the quantities, and you can bring in the quantity from that as well. So you can drill down into child collections. Okay, obviously it multiplies up the records, but you can do it. So, you know, you have that ability. You cannot do it in edit mode. Okay, column chooser does not give you the child collections. Okay, there's technically reasons for that, why it just would be a nightmare to try and implement. Okay, so we're just not doing it. So we do not allow you to edit child collections on the grid. Okay, if you want the ability to display a whole bunch of sales order items, which are contracts effectively, then, you know, it would be another menu item here showing you that as the top item, and then you can drill down further from that, or you can drill up the way. You can go down, so from a sales order item you can drill into the sales order, because that's a one-to-one relationship, yeah. But you cannot do it in child collections where you get one-to-many. Okay, so the implication of that is the fact that on this sales order, and Robert, this is kind of for you to let you know how to do this, if you want to create any forms or anything. This grid here, I wanted to be able to put the item and the quantity. Now the quantity on a sales order is not on the sales order line item. If you remember the design for our system, including RM6, is that we have delivery schedules. Okay, so we have multiple quantities against a sales order item. Okay, this form, the quantity here is actually showing the first quantity, because 90% of the time when you're doing a standard delivery, you're only doing one. Okay. If you change this to scheduled or blankets, you get a grid, and you can do multiple quantities. Okay, but this one here, what it's doing is it's creating the first delivery for you, and this box here effectively is actually showing you the information from the first delivery. Yeah, in this box here, to allow you to put these quantities in. The way that was done, so that we could use binding, was that in the code I have a property called first quantity. Okay, it's fairly straightforward. All it does is basically say, if the first quantity has not been loaded, in other words it's nothing, then load it from the database, find the first one in the sales order item quantities. If there isn't one, then add one. Okay, fairly straightforward. This caching thing, I'll come back to that at some other point. That's just for speed when doing these calculations. So effectively, I created a property that is not in the database. It's in the business logic of a sales order item called first quantity, which allows me to do binding. Okay. Now, by putting this tag on it, by telling the system DataOrigins that it's a field info and that it's a table link, what actually happens is field chooser now recognizes it. So my first quantity appears in field chooser, which allows me to put this quantity in there. Yeah. So effectively, I can pick any one of these. Now, like I say, that's a bug that should actually be ticked. I need to check that out because I've already got that column in there. But you can see you could actually put the length and the height in there if you wanted to as well, and you'll see there they are there. All I did was change this first quantity. I changed its caption, so in here, you can change that to, so it doesn't say first quantity. You can just change it to length, and that one there to height, and there we go. So that's us now got quantity, length, and height in there. You'll see it defaults to 1 if I put a sales item in there. Then length and height default to 1. But you could change them, and that would multiply out the total quantity. But as you can see, so in order to get the ability to have the quantity on a sales order item list, because it's part of a child collection, which are the deliveries, the sales order item deliveries, or quantities as they're called in this system, I had to create this property which brings in the first one, so that I could then display it on the grid. Because like I say, in editable grids you cannot edit child collections, but you can edit properties. So created a property, bring in the first item from the child collection, which is all it allows you to do when you're adding sales orders using the editable grid. You can only have one quantity, so you can't do delivery schedules by entering sales orders in this way. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. That was basically just to give you a taster of why I was twittering on recently about editable grids, and yeah, I'll get a version with that working to you some point soon. Cheers.